welcome to my channel Code with Hafiz. My name is Hafizullah Masoudi, and in this video I will create a to-do single page application using Laravel 9 and Vue.js 3, in which I will cover all the CRUD or create, read, update and delete functionalities. If you haven't subscribed to this channel yet, smash the subscribe button if you want more videos like this, and if you find this video useful, don't forget to give the thumbs up and a nice comment also. So let's start a tutorial. Well, for Laravel 9 and Vue.js 3 installation, I have a starter kit in which Laravel 9 and Vue.js 3 and Vue Router for Vue.js 3 and Bootstrap 5 has been already installed and configured. I will use it or I will use the starter kit for this tutorial, and you can find the link to the GitHub repository in the description of this video. And if you want to learn how to install Laravel 9, Vue.js 3, Vue Router for Vue.js 3 or Bootstrap 5, you can find the links to those tutorials also in the description of this video. So let's clone the repository from the GitHub using git command tool. I have already opened the repository in the browser, so what I will do is open a terminal here and go to my XAMPP directory. So cd/opt/lamp/htdocs, and to clone a git repository, we can say git clone and then the repository link. So let's go to the browser and click on this code and copy this link. Now let's paste it here, and for the name of the directory, let's name it todo_app and press enter. Now the next thing that I will do is go to the project directory or inside the project directory. So cd todo_app and press enter. Now to install all the composer dependencies, let's say composer install and press enter. And now let's also install all the JS or JavaScript dependencies. So I will use yarn package manager. So yarn, and after installing all the JS dependencies, now we have to create a .env file, because for now we don't have it, and we can create it using the .env.example file we already have in the project. So let's say cp.env.example, and then we want to create a new file by the name of .env. Now let's clear the terminal. Now let's also generate a key for our application. So php artisan key : generate, and finally we can say php artisan config : cache. And because I am using Linux, guys, I have to also give some permissions to the to-do application directory. And if you are using other operating system rather than Linux, you are good to go and you can skip this part. So I will do cd ... for going one folder back, and then sudo chmod -R757 todo app, and it will prompt me for my password. So let's clear the terminal and let's go back to the to-do application directory. Let's clear it and let's open it with Visual Studio Code. Now in here, guys, let's open the .env file, and for the database connection we will say todo_app, and username is root, and I don't have any passwords. Now let's save it and let's get back to the browser and open a new tab, and my XAMPP server is already running, so I will go to localhost/php my admin, and to create a new database, let's click on this new and let's name it todo_app, and for the collection let's select UTF-8 Unicode CI. Let's create it. Now let's also open the project in the browser tab. So let's open a new tab and localhost todo_app, and I also have to declare a public in the URL. So let's say public, and this is our application or starter kit. Well, we have these two components, one for the home and one for the task, and we will start creating the to-do application from this tasks component. Now let's make a model, migration and controller for the tasks we want to have for our to-do application. So what I will do is go to the terminal, and in here I will type, first let's clear the terminal, and let's say PHP artisan make model, and then a name for the model which will be task. And to create a migration and controller for this model also, we can pass a flag, and that would be -mc, m for migration and c for controller, and then press enter. Now let's get back to the text editor, and let's close this .env file, and let's go to app, models and task model, and in here I will create some fillable fields. So those fields should be protected, so protected $fillable, and it should equal to an array, and inside this array we want a title, a date for the task, a time for the task, and detail, and terminate it, save it and close it. Now let's create those fields using migration. So let's go to database, migrations, and let's open the last one, which is task migration, and I will duplicate this ID 4 times, and the first one should be for the title, and the type should be string, and let's say title. Next one is also a string, which should be for the date. The third one is also a string, which should be for time, and the fourth one is detail. It should be type text, and let's say this one is for detail. Now let's save it, and let's get back to the terminal and run the migrations to create the tables. So let's go to the terminal, and to run the migrations we can say PHP artisan migrate, and press enter, and tables have been created successfully. And now if we go back to the browser, go to the phpMyAdmin and refresh, you can see now we have these tables available. And if we go to the tasks table, we have all the fields available. Now let's go to the project tab here, and the first thing that I will do is center everything in this page, because for now you can see the title is aligned to the left, so we want everything to be centered. So let's go to the text editor and open that component. So let's go to resources, JS components and task component, and in here what I will do is cut this h5 from here and create a row, and let's also declare another class for it, which would be justify content center, and press enter. And inside here what I will do is create a call md8, so dot call md-8, and inside this call md let's create a card, and the card should have a card header, so card hyphen header, and let's also give the background color, so bg-dark, and inside this card header let's create two call mds of 6 to divide it to two parts. So call md6, and let's duplicate it, and the first one is for the title, and let's also declare a class for it, which would be text light to make it white, and then we want to float it to the start of the div. And in this other call md6 we want to create a button to be able to open a Bootstrap model, and inside that Bootstrap model we will have our input fields, which will store get the data from the user input and then store it to the database. So we can create a button here, and let's give it a class of btn-success and btn-sm for small, and let's float it to the start, or not start guys, end. And for the text of the button let's say new task. Save it, and to compile the changes we have to run yarn run watch. So open the terminal, and in here let's say yarn run watch. Now let's close the terminal because we don't need it anymore, and the code has been compiled successfully. And if we get back to the browser now, reload, you can see we have now this button here, but it's not floated to the end. Let's see what is the problem. Now the problem is that we have created these two col MDs, but we don't have any row for these two. So let's cut it and let's create a row for it and then paste them. Now let's indent it also, and if we save it and let's refresh, and yeah, now it looks much better. Now let's create an @click event for this button and open a Bootstrap model. So what I will do is, first of all, get a Bootstrap model. So let's go to or search for Bootstrap in the Google, and let's go to this first link, and in here let's go to the docs, and if we scroll a little bit down we can go to this components and click on the model, and if we scroll down in here we can copy this example model. So let's copy it and let's get back to text editor. I will paste it after the row, so let's paste it here, and let's also indent it a little bit, and for the ID of the model let's say task model, and let's copy it. Let's also paste it for the label, but leave the label beside it. So let's copy it and paste it in this ID label also. And to open this model, what we can do is assign an @click event to this button. So let's say @click, and then let's name a function create task, and let's create this create task function at the bottom. So in here let's put a comma and methods curly braces, and then create task and curly braces. And to open the model we can say $, parenthesis, and then the ID of the model, which was task model, and then dot model parenthesis show. And now if we get back to the browser, go to the project tab, refresh and click on it, now you can see model has been loaded. Now let's also make this model centered, and let's also make it large, and let's also customize it and put our input fields. So let's get back to the text editor, and if I scroll to the model, well, let's first of all make this model centered. So let's say model hyphen dialog hyphen centered, and let's say model hyphen LG to make it large. For the title of the model, let's say create new task, and inside the body what I will do is create a row, and inside this row let's create a col MD4, and let's press enter, and let's create a forum group. So dot forum group, and let's create a label. This one should be for title, and let's say title here, and let's create an input field. Type should be text. Let's give the class of forum control, and let's say v-model should equal to, for example, task data collection, and inside that we will have a title. Well, I want to validate the data using JavaScript, so what I will do is create a span tag after the input and give it a class of text hyphen danger, and I will declare a v-show for it because I want to show this span tag whenever the validation is true. So we can check for the validation. If it is true, then we want to show it, and we can do that by saying, for example, we will have a task errors object which will take inside the title object. If title is true, then it will show this span. And for the content of the span, let's say title is required. Now let's duplicate this col MD 2 times more because we want the date and the time also. So in here let's say date, type should be date, and for the view model let's also say date. For the text of the validation, let's say that date is required, and in here let's also check for the date if it is true. And the next one is for time, and the type should be time, and view model should be also time, and validation message should be time is required if the time validation is true. Now for the detail, I will create another row after this row. So let's press enter here and create another row which will take a call md-12, and let's declare a label for it which will be for detail. Well, let's create a forum group also, so I will cut it and let's say forum group and then paste it here. For the text of the label, let's say detail, and for the input, let's create a text area, and I don't need the name or ID or columns, but I do need the rows. And let's also give the class of forum control, and for the rows, let's say it should be by default 3 rows, and let's say v model should be task data.detail. Well, I don't want to validate the details, so I will leave it without a span tag. Now the next part is, guys, let's first of all change this button content to create task, and let's also assign an @click event to this button. So @click, we want to store the task. Now let's create this store task method at the bottom. So in here, let's put a comma and let's say store task and curly braces. Now before working on this function, I want to create all the objects that we have bind to all the inputs we have, and we can do that in the data field. So in here, let's create a data field, parenthesis, curly braces, and it will return some objects. Don't forget the comma here. Now the first one is task data, colon, curly braces. First one is title, which should be an empty string, and the next one is date, the third one is time, and the last one is detail. And we also need one for the validation. So in here, let's put a comma and let's say task errors, and it should take title as by default false, and let's duplicate it 2 times more. And next one is for date, which should be also false, and next one is time, which should be also false. Now let's start working on the store task. So to validate the data, we will check for the input fields and check accordingly. If it is empty, we want the validation to true. If it is not empty, then the validation will be false. So let's say this dot task data dot title, if this is equal to an empty string, so let's put a question mark here, then we want this dot task errors dot title to be true. And if it is not empty, then we want the same validation. So let's copy it and paste it here, and then we want to make it false. Now let's duplicate it, and the next one is for date. So let's copy it, paste it here, and the third one is for time. So let's also copy it and paste it here. And if the input fields are not empty, so let's check for this one also. So let's say if this dot task data dot title, if it's true or not empty. Let's also put an and, check for the date, and another and operator, and check for the time. If they are not empty or have data, then we want to call Axios function and send the request to the controller using Laravel routes. So let's make it, guys. Let's write the code for it. So let's say Axios dot post, and for the URL, what I will do is first of all create a global URL. So let's go to the sidebar and let's go to app.js, and we will create it after we create the app. So in here, let's say window.url should equal to quotation slash todo_app/public/, and that's all for the global URL. Now let's close it, and now in here, let's say window.url, and we want to concatenate it with the rest of the URL, which will be API/store task, and we want to send the data also. So we will put a comma here, and then this dot task data, and then we have a then function which will take the response, and it will be a fat arrow function. And for now, let's say console.log. We want to log the response data. And to catch the errors, we can declare a catch function here, which will take errors, and it will be also logged to the console. So let's say console.log errors. Now the next part is, guys, to create this store task route. So let's go to the sidebar and let's go to routes api.php, and before everything, let's import our controller. So use app/http/controllers/task controller, and at the bottom let's create the route. So route : post, and let's say store task, and it should go to the task controller. So task controller : class, and inside the controller we will have a store task method. Now let's create the store task method in the controller. So let's go to the app folder, http controllers and task controller. Well, before everything, let's load our model. So use app/models/task, and inside the controller let's say public function and store task, which will have a request. And to create a task using the models, we can say task model : create function, which will have an array, and inside this array let's say title should equal to $request arrow title, and put a comma. Next we have the date, which should be equal to $request arrow date, and comma. Next we have a time, which will be equal to $request arrow time, comma. Finally we have the detail, which will be also equal to request arrow detail. And after saving or creating the task, we will return a message. So return response arrow JSON, and in here we will say task stored successfully. Now let's get back to the browser and check our code if it works. So let's go to the browser and let's also open the inspect element, and let's go to the console tab and let's refresh, and let's click on the new task and try to create task without input fields. So you can see data is being validated, and let's try to submit some data. So task number 1, date should be 12, time should be this time, and let's say some text for task number 1, and let's say create task, and you can see we have now message in the console: task created or stored successfully. And if we go to the database table tasks, you can see now we have this one task available in the table. But you notice, guys, the model didn't close, and that is because we have to close the model after we store the data. So let's do it, guys. Let's get back to the text editor and let's go to task component, and in here what I will do is copy this model code from the create task, and in this Axios request I will put another dot, and I will create a finally function, and it should equal to a fat arrow function. And in here let's paste our code, and instead of show I want to hide it. And one thing more that I want to do is, guys, I want this task data and task errors in their default values whenever we open the model for the create task, and we can do that in this create task function. So let's say this dot task data should equal to curly braces, and let's copy all the fields from here and paste it here, and the next one should be for the errors. So this dot task errors should equal to curly braces, and let's also copy these 3 objects and paste it here. Now let's get back to the browser, refresh, and now if we try to submit another task. So let's say task number 2. Let's select all the fields, some text for task number 2. Let's create the task, and you can see modal closed. And if you check the database, now we have our tasks available. Now the next part is, guys, to get all the data or read all the data from the table, from the database, and show it in the user interface. Let's do it, guys. Let's get back to the text editor, and in here what I will do is create another function, and I will create it at the top of the other functions. So let's say get tasks, parenthesis, and then curly braces. And inside this function what I will do is use Axios request. So Axios.get, and then window.url will concatenate it with the API slash, let's say, get tasks, and it should take a then function which will take a response, and it should equal to curly braces. And let's create an object for the tasks. So in here let's say tasks curly braces, which will be an empty object by default, and we will store this response we get from this task get tasks function and store it in the tasks. Well, let's put a comma here also to get rid of the error, and inside here we can say this dot tasks should equal to response dot data, and let's also catch the errors. So catch errors should equal to curly braces, and let's console log the errors. And I think that's all. Now let's create this API route. So let's go to the api.php and duplicate this one, and let's paste it instead of this one. And for the method, let's say this one should be get. Now let's create this function get tasks. I will create it at the top, so let's create it here, public function get tasks, and let's press enter. And inside this function let's return a response and JSON, and we will use the task model : latest to get according to the latest ones and sort them, and then we can use the get function to get all the tasks. Now we are getting the tasks, but we aren't showing it in the user interface. Well, we will use this tasks object we created because we are storing the response in this object, so we will use it in the user interface. So let's scroll to the top, and where we have our card, and we only have created the card header. So let's create the card body. In here let's put our card body, so card hyphen body, and inside here what I will do is first of all create a responsive div. So let's say table responsive, and inside here let's put our table, so table.table to give it a class of table, and let's also make everything or all the text to the center, so text center. And inside here let's create the t-head, which will take a tr and it will take some ts. So let's duplicate it. First one is for the count, next one is for the title, and next one is for the date and time, and this one is for the detail, and this one is for the actions. Now let's create the t body. So after the t head let's say t body, and it will take also a tr, and in here we will have some tds. Now for the tr what I will do is loop for the tasks. So let's say v-4, and let's create some parentheses in tasks. We will loop for the tasks variable, and we will have also a key, and the key should be index. And to get the index, in here I will create a new object because we will loop for each of the tasks in task, and then comma index to get all the indexes of each of the row. Now inside the first td, let's put double curly braces, and we want the index to be counted with 1, which will start from 1, because you know indexes always start from 0 in arrays. So we are counting it with 1 to start from 1. Then let's put another double curly braces, and this time let's say task dot title, and the next one is, let's say, double curly braces task dot date, and let's put the time also, so double curly braces task dot time. Well, for the detail, what I will do is check for the detail, because I want to limit the characters of detail. So I will put a shorthand if else statement here. So let's put double curly braces, and let's first of all check for the length of the detail. So task dot detail dot length, and if it is less or equal to 10 characters, let's put a question mark. Then I want to show the complete detail, so task dot detail, and else if it is greater than 10 characters, then I want to limit it. So I will use a JavaScript function. So let's say task dot detail dot sub str, and I want to limit it from index 0 to index 10, and I also want to concatenate a string which will say 3 dots. Now let's save it, and for the actions I will leave it empty for now and get back to the browser, and let's go to the project tab to check our code if it works, and it does not work. And you know guys, why aren't we getting any tasks? Because if we get back to the text editor and scroll down, you can see we have created this get tasks function, but we are not running it. So let's create a mounted field here. So let's create a mounted parenthesis curly braces, and don't forget the comma. Now in here what we will do is run the function, so this dot get tasks, and to run it we will put parenthesis in front of it. So let's save it now, and let's get back to the browser, refresh. Now hopefully we are getting our tasks successfully, so our get function is working just fine. Now this being done, we have finished the read functionality also, and now it's time to create the update functionality. So for update guys, let's first create an update button, and we want to create it for each of the row that we have in this table. So let's get back to the text editor, and in here if we scroll to the top where our table is located, and we have this actions td empty for now. So let's create a button here, and let's give it a class of btn dash primary and btn dash sm for small, and for the text of the button let's say edit, and let's also assign an @click event. So let's say @click, and we need the class. Let's put a space here. So @click event, and let's say edit task, and we also want to pass the task variable, so task in the parenthesis. Now let's save it, and if we scroll down we have to create this edit task function. So let's create it after get tasks. So in here let's put enter, and let's say edit task, and we have the task data also, and curly braces, and inside here what I want to do is copy everything from the create task function. So let's copy this here and paste it here, and we want to open the same model, but for the data we don't want them to be in the default value. We want to assign the data that we have in this task. So in here instead of empty string we can say task dot, for example, title. Now let's copy it, and in here let's paste it. This one is for date, and this one is, let's paste it for time, and the last one is, let's paste it for detail. For the task errors, let's make them as their default value. Now to check our code, let's save this file and let's get back to the browser and reload, and you can see we have this button, and if we click on it, you can see it loads the data in all of the fields. Now the next part is to submit the data and save the changes, but you can see for both of the forums or both of the buttons, we are opening the same model with the same function, and for this to work we have to create a variable which will declare the state of the model. For example, let's create an object which will declare the edit mode if it is true or false. Let me show you in code. So let's go to the text editor, and if we scroll to the top, at the top of our data, and here let's create a variable edit mode, and by default it will be false, and we will make it true when the form is in edit mode, and if it is in create mode we will leave it or make it false. So if we come to the edit task, in here at the top, let's say this dot edit mode should be true because we are in the edit function, so we have to make it true. And in the create function, let's make it false, so this dot edit mode should equal to false. Now to use this in our model, let's scroll to the model, and in here first of all let's apply it on the title of the model. So what I will do is cut the title from here and put double curly braces, and inside here I will check for the edit mode. So if edit mode is not true, which means it is false, and we are loading the create function, so let's put a for example question mark here. We want to load a string, and if it is true then we want to load another string. So in here I will put the create new task string because the edit mode is false, and in here I will put update task, for example update task. Yeah, that's okay. Now if we get back to the browser, refresh, and if we click on the new task, you can see it says create new task, and if I click on edit, you can see now it says update task, and I hope you got what I mean. Now let's also change the create task button. So let's go to the text editor, and if I scroll down, let's cut this create task from here, or let's copy the code from the above title. So let's copy it because it is the same process we are doing there. So let's paste it instead of this one, and for the if edit mode is not true, then I want to say create task, and if the edit mode is true, I want to say save changes. Well, let's also apply it for the function because we want to call the functions also according to edit mode. So what I will do is paste the code in here, but I will remove the curly braces. So let's remove it, and in here what I will do is instead of string I will return some functions. So if edit mode is false, I want to return store task function with parentheses, and if the edit mode is true, then I want to for example call the function of update task, which we will create in a moment. Now for this to work, guys, you know that for the update task we also need to send the task ID along with the forum data because we want to update a specific task. So for that reason, what we will do is in the task data I will create another object by the name of ID, which will be empty also, and let's also add the ID to our functions. So in here I will add ID, which will equal to task.id, and in the create function I will empty the ID to empty string. So ID should be empty string. Now the next part is, guys, to create our update function, because if you see we have this update task function at the button, but we don't have it in our methods. So let's create it. What I will do is in here I will say enter and update task and put curly braces, and inside here what I will do is copy the create Axios request. So let's copy it because we have this validation also in here. So let's paste it here, but this time instead of for example sending the request to store task, I want to send it to update task, and I also want to send the ID. So let's say slash, and I want to concatenate it with, for example, this dot task data and dot ID. Now we created this ID earlier, if you remember, and the task data is also sending to the request, so that's okay. And we are outputting the console, something in the console. But instead of outputting to the console, what I want to do is update this get tasks list. So in here we can call the function. So this dot get tasks, and it will update the array. Now let's also paste it in the create function, because in here we also want to update the list after we create a new task. So let's paste it. Now the next part is, guys, to create this API route. So let's copy it and go to API PHP, and let's duplicate this store task and paste it instead. And this time we want to pass the ID also. So slash curly braces ID. Now let's create this function in task controller. So let's duplicate the store task, and instead of store task, let's say update task, and instead of create, let's also pass the ID here. So $ID, and instead of create, let's say where, and then we want to update, and for the where, let's say where ID equals to $ID, and we want to update the data. Now for the task stored, let's say task updated successfully. Now what I will do next is, guys, that check the code if it works. So let's get back to the text editor or browser and refresh, and now let's try to update a task. So in here I will say update and save the changes. You can see the model has been closed, and if we check it now, you can see it has been updated. And if we update the title, let's say updated, and save changes, you can see the list has been updated. Now this being done, guys, we have finished the task update functionality also, and now it is time to create or implement the delete functionality. Now for the delete functionality, let's also create a button, and then we will delete a task. So we will create it as same as we did for the edit. We want to create the delete button for each of the row. So let's get back to the text editor, and in here let's go to task component, and let's scroll to the table. What I will do is duplicate this edit button, and instead of edit task, what I will say is delete task, or let's name it remove task. And we also want to pass the task variable, and for the text of the button, let's say delete, and for the class, let's say danger, btn danger. Now let's create this remove task function. So let's scroll to the down, and I will create it after the get tasks. So let's say delete task, and we have task coming from the function. And in here what I will do is, first of all, let's create an object like we did for the edit mode, also for the delete mode, because I want to use the same model for the delete functionality also. So let's scroll, let's press enter here, and let's say delete mode, which will be false by default. Now let's use this delete mode in our functions. So in the delete task, let's say this dot delete task is equal to true, but will delete mode, it's not delete task, it's delete mode. And for the other functions, we want this field or this object to be false. So let's copy it, and let's put it in the edit, but it will be false. And let's also copy this one and put it in the create task, and here it will be false. Now in the delete task function, what I will do is also assign the ID of the task, because we want to delete a specific task, so we need the ID. So this dot task data and then dot ID, which we created earlier, should equal to task dot ID. And we also want to open the model, so let's open a model. So let's paste it here, and this time let's say show. Now let's work on our model. So let's scroll to the top, and we want to work from the above. So first of all, we need to edit the title. For example, for the delete mode, we want the title to say delete task. So for that, what I can do is, for this h5, I can declare a v-show, and I can say if the delete mode is not true. So let's say delete mode false, and I will duplicate this one. Well, this one is for if the delete mode is true, and for the title, let's declare another title which will say delete task. And if we check it in the browser, let's go to the browser, refresh, and if we click on this, you can see it's for the create. If we click on this, it's for the update, and if we click on this, well, it's throwing error. Oh, remove task. The function is remove task, guys. Let's make it remove task, and if we refresh now, let's click on it, and you can see delete task. Now let's also customize the other parts of the model. So let's get back to the text editor, and the next part that I will customize is the model size, because for the delete I want the model to be, for example, small. So what I can do is cut this model LG from here, and I will convert this class attribute or field or bind it to the Vue.js, and then let's grab everything inside template literals, and in here I will put $, curly braces, and then I will check for the delete mode. So if delete mode is not true, so let's say delete mode not true, then I want to show the code I just cut it, which will be model LG. And if the delete mode is true, then I want to say model dash, for example, SM for small. Now let's also make some changes to other parts of the model. So if I scroll down, well, let's also hide this input fields. So for the row, I will say v-show, and if the delete mode is not true, so delete mode. Let's copy this, and if we scroll down, well, that was the row. Let's also hide this one row, but instead of these rows, what I will do is, in here I will put enter, and in here I will say, for example, h5. Well, this one should be h5, and let's give it a class. So I will give it a class of text center, and for the text of the h5, let's say, are you sure you want to delete this task? And for the footer, what I will do is paste the v-show if delete mode is false, because I want to create another footer for the delete. But in this footer, we will have, for example, the close button and another button to delete the task. So for the @click event, let's say delete task, and for the text of the button, let's say delete task. So let's remove this, and let's say delete task. Now let's check our model if the changes are applied or not. So let's go to the browser and refresh, and now if we click on it, you can see now we have this modal, but our code is not working. And if we get back to the text editor, we have to say if the delete mode is true for the other footer. Now let's get back and refresh, and you can see it's working just fine. And if we click on edit, well, we don't want to get this, and that is if we get back to the code and go to the edit function. So let's go to edit. But well, we are making the delete mode in here false. Well, let's try our code again and click on this one. We are getting it in here too, and in here also. Well, that is because if we get back to the text editor, and we have to copy this we show delete mode true to the header also, which is this h5. So let's paste it here, and now if we save, get back to the browser, refresh, now we should be good to go. So let's click on it. Yeah, now it looks much better. Well, let's also declare a margin for these two buttons. So let's get back to the text editor, and let's scroll to the top. In here, let's say mx-1, and in here also mx-1. And if we save it, get back to the browser, refresh, now it looks much better. Now let's work on the delete task function. So let's get back to the text editor, and now we want to create this delete task button. So I will create it before this remove task. So in here, let's say delete task, and I will copy the function from the update. So let's copy it and paste it here, and I think everything is good to go. So we are sending to the URL, but the URL should be delete task, and we want the task ID, but we are not sending the task data. So let's remove it, and then we are updating the tasks list, and then we want to hide the model. Now let's create this route. So let's go to api.php, duplicate this one, and let's paste it here. And now we have to create this method in the controller. So let's go to controller, and in here let's say public function delete task, and we have ID coming from the URL. Now we will say task : where ID is equal to ID, then we want to delete, and I want the response message. So let's duplicate it, and let's say task deleted successfully. Well, this one should be task, and this one also task, and I think I misspelled the store also. So let's say task stored successfully. Now let's get back to the browser and try our code if it works. So let's go to the browser, refresh, and let's try to delete this task number 1. So let's say delete, and you can see it has been deleted without any errors successfully. Now this being done, guys, our video has come to an end, and I hope you enjoyed watching the video. If so, don't forget to give the thumbs up and share it with your friends. If you are new to this channel, don't forget to subscribe also. Thanks for watching. See ya in the next video.